Disclaimer, I don't know 40k lore, nor tabletop rules, nor what units factions have. I'm just doing this for fun, so let's get started. So, I think the initial launch factions will be Guardsmen, Space Marines, Chaos Cults, Chaos Space Marines, and Greenskins. The reason I think this is a lot of the assets for them kind of exist, and if they have to make new things, they can reuse a lot of things. So, for example, Guardsmen will have Guardsmen units, and Chaos Cults will include Traitor Guardsmen, which will be basically the same thing. So, Space Marines, for example, as well. If you make a Space Marine, you can use that model for the Loyalists and also the Chaos Space Marines. Just make them a little bit spikier. Greenskins, we have greenskins in Warhammer 3. You gotta change up their looks a little bit, but they're actual models you can use. You just gotta change the clothes, maybe give them new voiceovers, but that'll basically do most of it. And for Chaos Cults, I think what you can do is have cultists and Traitor Guardsmen that can summon demons. And we already have most of the demons in the game already for Warhammer 3, and you can reuse that. So I think it's smart. Maybe you can consider it cheap, but if you have all these things, might as well use them. So here is a big Excel list of what I think the units should be. I did kind of condense it a little bit, but basically, all of this is my opinion, and one of the big opinions that I have is armor should be a little bit more important. And the reason I think that is because every unit in the game currently has some armor piercing. That means, peasants with like pitchforks and zombies and Skaven slaves, they have armor piercing, which means a Chaos Warrior, a super powerful guy in like almost impenetrable armor can get hurt by a peasant, a pitchfork basically, and that's kind of lame. So I think we should lower armor piercing a little bit just because it's going to be a lot of shooting in the game, and that'll mean Chaos Space Marines or Space Marines or whoever got a lot of armor vehicles, they'll just get blasted by a bajillion guns, and that'll just not be fun. The first unit will be the Guardsmen Conscript. They're basically the Skaven Slave Slinger equivalent. They're very cheap, very expendable, but because there's a lot of them and you can get a lot of them easily, they'll have a lot of firepower overall. Because, as I said, peasants having 4 armor piercing is kind of too strong, I feel like. So I'm just going to give them basically no armor piercing whatsoever. The second unit will be a Guardsman with Lasgun. This will be basically the most, basic unit that you'll have. You'll get a bunch of these guys, they'll shoot their lasguns, they're not great in melee, and, the face of the Guardsman. Next is the Guardsman with Chainsword and Pistol. So, Guardsmen will need some kind of melee unit, and I think this will be a good compromise. Guardsmen are known to use chainswords, they have good enough melee stats, they'll use a pistol to kind of shoot on their way in, kind of like Free Company Militia. This will also be the last generic Guardsman infantry unit. The rest will be regiments that are specific, like, Cadians and stuff like that. So the thing about Guardsmen is that they're supposed to be about different regiments and even abhumans and vehicles all working together to beat monsters of the galaxy, right? So I want mechanics to be specifically about having them kind of group up together over time through missions or, gifts or whatever. And I think shadowy dealings might be a way to do that. So there are 2 main ways I think this can happen. One is to make the different regiments only recruitable through this mechanic. Now, this might have some issues because, people will be like, hey, why can't I use my Cadians, like, when I'm Death Corps of Krieg? Why can't I just recruit them? And stuff like that. But this will kind of portray the whole fact that, Guardsmen, they're in this part of the galaxy. They're kind of, separated from the Imperium as a whole. So they need to call for reinforcements. And they're like, holding out until reinforcements arrive. That kind of thing. I think if you do it like this, you can even get stuff like, oh, in your darkest hour, Space Marines are here. You can recruit them and recruit all these regiments and all that over time. instead of just being able to recruit them from your main settlements and stuff like that. I think that could be thematic, but I can understand players not wanting this. The other option is to just let all the regiments just be recruitable by all guardsmen. So, if you're playing like Acadian commander, you can still recruit like Death Corps of Krieg or Kadak Chan or whatever. So the mechanic will instead give you more reinforcements, I guess, because as more reinforcements are coming, more are available immediately. Kind of like Grudge Settler units for dwarves, or Lizardmen have their Blessed Spawn units. So once you complete missions and you gain favor with these regiments, they'll say, "Oh yeah, we'll give you some more reinforcements, and you can recruit them whenever you like." And this way, you can still have it kind of like how it is now, where some factions specialize on specific units, right? Like, so, for example, Korn, Skull Taker focuses on demon units, whereas Arbol focuses on infantry units, like mortal units. You can do it more like that, where Cadians buff Cadian units more, but you can still recruit other regiments if you want. But I think this is a little bit more boring and more, standard, but hey, there's nothing wrong with that, I guess. So the next two we'll group a little bit. It is the Cadian Shock Trooper and the Kazarkin. So you know what the Cadians are. They're kind of the face of the Guardsmen these days. Like in Space Marine 2, all the Guardsmen are all Cadians, apparently. But Cadians are basically just better Guardsmen, and the Kazarkin are elite Cadians, basically. And you can kind of see them like as handgunners and the Null Ironsides. They're just kind of, one's a good range unit, good generally, and then the Null Ironside is basically a more elite unit. So one thing that is kind of weird with Warhammer 3 is, Null Ironside are still human, but each model is like way higher HP. And I think we gotta kind of do it like that too, because if you don't, their HP gonna be too low. So yeah, we'll increase the HP a little bit. The next regiment will be the Death Corps of Krieg. I'm not sure if I'm using them correctly here, but because they're supposed to be, very good at sieges, attrition, they're good at trench warfare, but I'm kind of more focusing on the trench warfare part. Again, if you don't have melee units, Imperial Guards are going to be like all shooting, which is kind of weird. So I think the Death Corps of Krieg can be a little bit more focused on the melee. And I thought about making them unbreakable, but I think they're still human. They'll still run away if, things are too bad. So, you could get the immune psychology or something, but we're going to say not unbreakable. And they have submachine guns because, trench warfare, it is mostly like submachine gun, get in there. You want a maneuverable, good firearm, and then you go into melee a lot because you're in the trenches. That's kind of what I'm thinking with these guys. The next are the Katachan Jungle Fighters. So, obviously, they're taking inspiration from Rambo. They basically don't wear any armor. So, we have to make them kind of similar to Slayers, I think. You could make the argument that they're so elite that maybe they should be like 30 models, kind of like how Doomseekers are. But for just, ease of use, let's just say similar to Slayers, good in melee, maybe has a pistol, kind of like the Slayer Pirates, but like not as bad in melee. And they could have, unique things like maybe they have physical resist because they're so hardy because they're from a death world. Maybe you can say they have Strider because they're so used to the jungle stuff. I think they will be kind of bad because they have no armor, so they'll get shot to pieces. But if you use them correctly, they may be good, kind of like Doomseekers. The next are the Tempestuous Scions. So, from what I read, they're like really elite, really specialized. I'm not sure if they're a regiment. I think they're just like really elite Inquisition stuff, maybe. But still, they're humans. They're very well trained. They got good armor. They got good weapons. So having like an elite unit that's, still human that the guardsmen can actually employ might be a good idea. Again, I don't know much about these guys, but we'll just go with it. The next is the Ogren with the Ripper Gun. So what I'm thinking here is kind of like a lead belcher, except, not as bad in melee, because the Ogren are supposed to be really tough. They have guns, sure, but when they get into melee, they just like use those guns to like knock people around. So I don't think they should, because the lead belchers are squishier than regular ogre bulls. I think we want to make them kind of stronger. And instead of the long range that the lead belcher cannons give, they can use kind of like blunderbusses, where kind of like a shotgun. You can use a lot of burst damage, but it's like short range. They're a lot tougher, but you can't shoot from as far. So I think they'll be kind of worse than lead belchers, but that's not the point. We want to add in these guys. That's kind of what we're doing. The next will be the Bullgrin, which is basically an Ogrin with a lot of armor. Now, I think you could literally just add in the Maneater with the Iron Fist and just give him a lot of armor, and boom, that's already a Bullgrin. But I think specifically because I want the armor to do a lot more. As I said, a lot more weapons are gonna have less armor piercing, which means armor is more important. So if they are going to get a lot of armor and a shield and stuff like that, they should probably cost more. They don't need to do as much damage or whatever, and that's kind of what I went with. And now that we're done with the Ogrins, we could also talk about the Ratlings. So they're apparently snipers. You could make them kind of similar to Hawkland long rifles, but I'm not going to really focus on them too much right now. The next two I'm going to talk about together because I think they'll have very similar mechanics. So they are the heavy weapons team and also the mortar team. So, this is 40k. It's not going to be like you roll out a old-timey cannon along with your guys. No, it's more modern warfare, right? So you might be thinking, hey, heavy weapons team, we have like Ratling gunners. You can just make it like that. But I think that would make it not as good because how did two people carry a giant machine gun? I know in the picture it's like two people using a machine gun, but I think making it more like the Goblin Hewer instead would make more sense. You're carrying this machine gun thing somehow, and then you kind of set it up and then shoot. And if you're running away, you don't like run away with the machine gun, you drop it and run away, and when you rally back, you can just get back on it and shoot. And same with the mortar team. So it's not going to be like the actual mortar in game where it's like a giant machine thing. You just carry this little like pipe thing. They shoot mortars. I'm not sure if there are even mortars in 40k, but I think that would make sense, because most of the actual artillery are on vehicles, which we'll be talking about next. So you want to have some kind of infantry carrying equipment kind of thing in the game somehow, I think. So the next vehicles I am talking about, I only really know kind of from Dawn of War, and the first one is going to be the Chimera, and it is a APC type unit. It's not a tank, so I don't think it should have the directional shielding. It is lower armor than that. It has good armor. It basically acts like the Chaos Dwarf Iron Demon. It has a shooting weapon, it's basically a heavy bolter. It shoots kind of like the Goblin Hewer, but it's only one instead of like four. It's fast enough. It can like charge things up. It is an APC, so it's supposed to carry people, but I don't think Total War is really made for that. So we can just use it like a light armored vehicle. Okay, so while recording, I kind of realized that I got units mixed up. So what I was thinking about was the Manticore. So the Manticore looked like a unit that is kind of like a singular vehicle that shoots like a magma cannon or a Deathstreak rocket launcher that fires shots like the Hellstorm rocket battery. That was what I was going to talk about, but no, the Basilisk is more like a Deathstreak rocket launcher. So confusion there, but you can kind of get what I'm talking about. Basilisk, Deathstreak rocket launcher has a little missile thing that it can shoot up and it goes down. It's literally that. For the Manticore, it's just a Hellstorm rocket launcher that is a single entity type unit, basically. And the last unit, which will have the easiest comparison, is the Leman Russ tank. That is, you can just make a steam tank into a Leman Russ tank. You have the main gun. You have literally a guy on top of the tank that is like, get me closer so I can hit them with my sword. That thing. You could have the steam gun. Could be, I guess you gotta change the models a little bit. The top gun should be the main gun that fires the cannonballs. it might have like side guns or something that have like uh heavy bolter and a guy that shoots. That would be a pretty good Leman Russ. And just like the steam tank, it'll have the directional shield, a lot of armor. It can run through things pretty easily, good in melee kinda. And yeah, that would be the most obvious choice. The one thing I would change is Steam Tank is unbreakable, right? So, the demon engines, like the demon's tongue and stuff like that, I kind of get because there's like, a demon inside of it. So maybe they're in control or something. But a Steam Tank or a regular tank gets really damaged, and the people inside are like, nah, we're fine, we're invincible, and they just kind of never break. I think that you gotta make it break, but have like high enough leadership so that it doesn't break easily. I think that would make it more realistic, I think. So yeah, that's how I think the Imperial Guard would be made if Total War 40K ever exists. It might, who knows? And those are all just my opinions. I'm sure you think of something else. You thought of, oh hey, the ideas you had, they're stupid. Hey, I'm not saying they're smart, but that's kind of just what I'm thinking. So yeah, hope you had fun, I guess, and goodbye.